What's up, everybody? I've got perhaps the best no limit cash game player in the world right now. Perhaps the best heads up no limit cash game player in the world right now. I'm not 100% sure, but it looks like he's a strong contender for it. Maybe I don't know if he's playing other stuff yet, but he recently won the Coin Poker. I'm so bad with names. Coin Poker Cash Championship. Is that what's called?
Cash Game World Championship.
Cash Game World Championship. He crushed it by about 30 buy-ins, winning at 14 big blinds per 100. A win rate you guys would think is impossible a lot of the time. But here we are against the best in the world, or supposedly the best in the world. Owen Messere. I think I'm pronouncing it right.
Now,
Get ready to level up. This is Winning the Game of Life, presented to you by Dan Jungleman Cates.
I'd like to pick your brain a little bit and find out what kind of potential is out there for poker and how you did this. So would you like to tell us what you thought of your competition? I heard a little bit of stuff through the grapevines, and were you impressed with your competition? Do you think that the best in the world, do you think these guys are the best in the world? What do you think? You're going to talk even a little shit?
yeah, I would definitely say I think all of the top names were playing. Davy was a bit more limited in terms of the volume he put in, but yeah, it was there was some really tough competition in there. I think everyone was in there giving it their all for the most part. Like Linus was putting in a ton of volume, especially at the start. But yeah, managed to run away with it in the end.
How is there any summary of what it was that you were able to do without? We'll go over a little bit of detail. I know you can't give away all your secrets. That allowed you to win over all these guys, Linus, Love, Davy, etc. Involving. I mean, were you just running hot, or do you think it was a big skill edge?
Well, I think running hot definitely helps.
Well, of course.
I think one area where I think I had a significant edge over, especially Linus and Davy, was well, in particular over Linus. I would say I was doing better at beating some of the weaker players for the maximum, whereas I don't think he was taking all of the opportunities given to him. Like sometimes I saw him in hands versus weaker players, and he was letting them get away with some stuff, not pushing his edges as hard as he could. So I think that was one place where I was definitely like pulling away from the rest of the pack.
I could see how that could make sense. It's certainly, you get bigger edges against people making more mistakes than you do against people on the whole when they're playing GTO. And there's quite some large exploits. Don't know if you want to talk about them. I started studying a bit with the solver, and I realized, it's funny to me because I was reading your interview, and actually a lot of your experience with playing with people is similar to mine. I remember actually a hand you played against me. You completely fucking soul read me. We'll get that. Are you willing to tell your thought process for that one? But I think we should talk. Yeah, we'll go over that because I brought it up straight away. But then we'll get right back into this challenge. I remember this hand. I was just owned so hard, and I know that this maybe you're thinking what I was thinking. You just knew, you saw my game or something like that. I like, you 3-bet, I called, flop was 6-5-3. You check called, the turn was something like a 7. You check called again. I believe this was heads up, and the river was like a 6 or something like that. And you check called again, or like a jack, some total non-changing card.
I vaguely remember that. I think it was an overcard on the river.
Maybe a 9 or a 10.
Yeah, 4 to a straight and then a low overcard.
Yeah.
It can't have been a jack because you had king jack. And I heroed ace queen. Right?
Yes, I remember what your hero was. I did not forget that part.
Yeah, I remember that hand. It's kind of an interesting one because I was like quite new to high stakes at that point. and I sort of knew what my image was gonna be. That
I didn't have
so
any. I didn't even know who you were at the time.
yeah. That's what I mean. As in, my image is going to be there's a guy who's new to playing quite big. There's a decent chance he's like money scared and gonna get run over. There's like a ton of scary hands you could have on this board. So I just kind of felt like you weren't gonna you weren't gonna slow down when you got that many encouraging cards against a guy who you probably felt there was a decent chance I was just, money scared and gonna let things go. So yeah, I decided to flick in the call and was, pretty happy to see the king high.
I wouldn't say that that's really the reason why I decided to do that. I just thought I can just say that most people, to be honest, it's more based off of, it wasn't based off anything psychological. It's just based off of, I think most people don't know what the calling down range is. And I don't think that most people know what the ranges look like in that spot. That's certainly been my experience for 10 years. And I know you talked about saying, oh, like for most of these players, you can just do whatever you're doing and it still works after a really long time. Yeah. Unless you're playing against actually very good players.
A lot of the tricks have a longer shelf life than they should. Because people will like, they'll see something and then because you're just one of many, many players, by the time the spot comes back around again, they've forgotten. So yeah, you can, a lot of the stuff sometimes I'm disappointed in people that you don't need to update what you're doing. It's like, oh, come on, I've been getting them with this for so long. We should be on the next level by now. But yeah, people will let you get away with murder.
Yeah, that is how I feel. Although, yeah, it's kind of sad, but at the same time, okay, take their money. Yeah.
Yeah. Not mad about the free money.
To be fair, sometimes their adjustments can be correct and it's hard to like adjust against the whatever percent the studied or consciously thinking player is. So sometimes people do take the right adjustment against the majority of people, and it just might not. And if you just happen to be whatever the counter is to all of that, then they happen to get shafted. I mean, to be fair, the population does do some things to counter itself in a smart way.
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas where I like to think I'm causing people more problems, because a lot of other people think about things in terms of a population, but I try not to. I try to think of every player as quite individual. It's always something I prefer to do, and I really like these sort of small pools where you get very familiar with the regs you're up against, because I think I'm much better at working out how an individual thinks rather than doing this like mass database stuff and working out what to do in the aggregate. I'd much rather, I'd rather do a deep dive on one person.
Sure. So there's multiple directions I can take this. I get that. I do both. I deep dive in somebody, especially if I'm really intrigued by them. There's such a tempting parallel to spirituality, but we'll get to that. So I want to ask you, have you done a deep dive on somebody who was very good and you learned a lot about the game through doing that? Or was it just, especially for this competition, or was it just like, this would be like the spot to do it? Or I've done such things, but I've learned some things about the game and mostly just for countering. I'm wondering, was that the case for you? Did you learn something deep when you did this sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the first player I had that experience with was Stefan. Because as I was coming up, I was always so fascinated by his hands. But yeah, there's been lots of players over the years who, I think, especially playing heads up, every time I've got to a point where I've had enough volume against one guy that I start really trying to work out how they think, it has this effect where you're not just studying for this one person, because the next time you play someone, you'll notice elements of their game. And it's like, oh, okay, I already know the counter to this. Like there was this guy I was playing heads up a bunch. His name's like Daniel Soltis.
I don't know this.
But yeah, he's like an MTT, right? But he was just playing me some 5K, and he has this really, really aggressive style. Like every single person talks about him as the guy with the most out of line stats, but he still somehow manages to win.
Is that Barack?
No.
Because that's a bit of a bit of a mystery. Also, I mean, I played against Barack, and I swear to God, yeah, he's giving me quite some trouble. Clearly, he's doing some smart things. I can see it.
Yeah.
I don't want to. Well, I can go over it a little bit. I think he's just shifting some things in his range to fuck with, especially some population things, and just to be balanced overall and have modest aggression in some spots. But okay, this Daniel
Brack's,
huh?
Yeah, but Brack is he has a very like unique ability to get in someone's head and to understand exactly how they think and which spots they like or which spots they don't like, and yeah, it just how they're gonna perceive everything he's doing. Like he understands all of those dynamics on such a high level, very intuitively, that it can feel a bit like chasing shadows playing him.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. What about this Daniel guy?
Yes, he's very in your face. He's kind of the opposite. He's very disrespectful. He puts tons of money in. He's like completely out of line about it, just trusting that you won't know the answers. And because lots of people aren't used to dealing with that level of aggression, they actually just can't play back at it. They don't know the responses. And playing him over a long period of time, it meant that, okay, I really have to learn how to deal with someone who is just fighting so hard to get so many chips in the pot. And obviously he's not doing it in like a just purely obviously like over bluffing way. It's not like you just flop bottom pair and you call him down and you win, because he knows his image and he was playing it well. So actually trying to have to find proper adjustments to deal with him was it was honestly a really good training exercise. And so now when I start seeing someone being over aggressive in a certain way, it's like I've done the hardest version of it, which was dealing with someone who is over aggressive literally everywhere, and you don't have enough hands to trap to just defend every line. You have to find like other things to, other ways to maneuver around it.
Sure.
So that was like, as someone who I don't think he gets a ton of recognition, but I think if anyone gets a chance to play him heads up and feel that level of pressure, and you go back to playing everyone else and it honestly feels quite relaxing. By comparison.
I definitely know what you mean, but I also have experience with all games. So I play limit games and they're more or less relaxing to me. And then people have these, I can tell you a bit about my own personal approach. It's some part of that. But there are also some caveats. I realize that there's certain psychological tendencies that people have that cross across various games. And one thing I've realized is I have to start, how do you say, stereotyping a bit for those tendencies. And yeah, you have to, it feels like I have to start breaking things, putting things into like less definable subsets would be the way to say it, or one of the ways, less tangible lines. I like the idea of what he's doing. I just think there's like different layers of it. And yeah, that's interesting too. It makes me want to take a look at some of the spots he's found. At some point, I mean, there are also certain ways in which to approach other opponents based on their own tendencies. Like, for example, there's a player that you've played against that I will not name because I don't really feel like shafting him too hard, but he has the tendency to, if you find a leak within that session, you just blast that leak because he's not going to adjust. But that's not true about everybody else. And he's like one of the best in the world, or at least he used to be. That's what I remember from playing against him. He just would like have his fucking game plan and then he would just stick to it. And if you found some problem in his game plan, he was fucked.
Right. Yeah.
For a long time, like really a long time, until he like went back and did a session review. Maybe you can figure out who that is. I don't want to tell you.
I actually have some ideas, but I don't want to say either. Yeah. But there are some names which come to mind pretty quickly.
Sure. So, are there any other guys that you've done a deep dive on people? I want to throw a little. I want to go into the Twilight Zone for a second, by the way. But go ahead if you know any others, especially in this challenge.
Yeah, so recently at least I've been playing a fair bit against Davy. And Davy is just so interesting to play because there's a constant war going on of him trying to just stop you seeing rivers. Like it's just really hard to get to the river against Davy. And so that's been really interesting, just going over all of these hands and working out how to play back against everything. Like there was a hand where I think he 3-bet the flop and then he barrels the turn, I shove the turn, and I'm bluffing with second pair and he called third pair.
What? What hand is this? What the fuck?
So it was a single raise pot heads up. It was Jack 8-4, I believe, with a flush draw.
Is it heads up?
Check raise. So yeah, heads up.
Okay.
I check raised the flop with he 3-bets with, I think he has 5-4. I want to say I have ace.
Okay, that's interesting, but okay, I'm not really sold on this 3-betting the flop thing, but okay.
Yeah, but that's his whole thing, is that he assumes that no one else has studied it.
Oh, so I've tried such approaches or looked into it, but I want to add there's a certain layer to that, because while that's a good idea, you have to look at the EV of these like little pocket, how do you say, these diverges in game theory, the change of what you actually lose at EV, and also how difficult it actually is to play against, on top of like some likelihoods of what people will do. It's not particularly easy to master that, but yeah, I do like that idea against like top quality opponents. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think what he's going for is the fact that because he gets into these spots so often, he's just going to play them at a much higher fluency and be more comfortable adjusting in them than you are.
Sure.
So then he's happy to get really out of line and make these very big adjustments in them to try and own you. But yeah, I think the turn was like a 3 or something. Yeah, a 3 or a deuce. I check, he barrels, and then I just rip it in. And he tanks for ages and calls off, and I have I have the ace 8 versus his 5-4. So I win a pretty big pot with my second pair. So yeah, I mean, he did have the read that I was bluffing. But yeah, this is why it's so interesting with him trying to get into these spots and trying to think about okay, well, there's various problems. If you're too passive in these spots, obviously he's going to realize way too much equity, and that's a problem. But if you're aggressive and you pick your aggression poorly, he's really prepared to get out of line to play back against it. So yeah, it's a real fight for your life against Davy. Every time you get into these lines, stacks get in really fast. It's so much fun to play. I think he's
interesting.
Yeah, he's the most fun player to play, in my opinion. I'd say it's kind of between him and Flushy. Flushy's fun in a different way. Flushy is very interesting because the pot will be 5 big blinds, and then suddenly you're all in on the river. So it's kind of the opposite of Davy, whereas Davy, the money gets in super fast. Flushy, you think you're in a chill spot, and then suddenly he's all in, and you okay, I have to deal with this 10x, 20x pot overbet.
Flushy's changed. I broke stone even against Flushy over the longest sample.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been around for quite a while, right? He's been
I think I was within 2 binds of him, one way or the other. Maybe he's got something to say about that. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that. Yeah, those guys they're so interesting to play because they have these spots where they're willing to get so out of line. I mean, I've been playing a bit against Linus recently, and don't get me wrong, it's still fun, but we're a lot more bounded. If there's a lot less insane hands, I think, which happen between us. It's a lot more sensible poker going on, and like things getting back and
It's so
forth, and
boring.
trying to
Fuck that.
yeah, we were trying to push our small edges, but then when I'm against Davy and Flushy, it feels like every single session there are a bunch of pots where we were both going for each other's throat completely. It's not, it's not to say that the massive overbets don't happen against Linus or whatever, but it's just everything feels a lot more sensible.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting, especially how that can be. Well, yeah, it depends. It reminds me of how fighting ends up working. I know you were talking a bit about people who have defensive styles. Some people, and I've noticed that some people really focus on not being exploited, and some people focus on going at each other's throats. But the ones that go at each other's throats are a lot more exciting, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Fuck, if I just sit there and just check just not put any money in and make sure that I'm balanced all the time, I might lose my mind.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm playing a certain player and their whole plan is they're gonna play a boring enough game style that like I have a 5 BB win rate, but I'll just get bored and punt. And like that's what they're counting on. I mean, I'm sure they haven't thought that through as their explicit game plan, but there are some people who I feel like that's how they're trying to make it work.
I mean, I guess that's an edge until you just sit there and think, fuck, you like barely beating this guy. It's not worth your time. It's hardly you don't get polar responses. That's
I play solidly out of spite.
Yeah. That's one thing that people don't really think about is to get more extreme responses out of poker and of life, like to get into private games, like to consider the meta game of these sort of how do you say your meta strategies, you have to lay on some kind of skews, and if you end up being ultra conservative, you kind of screw yourself over in the long run, at least if you're trying to get these higher end results from things like to become very rich, perhaps, or to expand your network, to get into live private games. I know that you are, I wanted to go into the trial, but go ahead, or I'll go ahead. I know that you now are getting into private games with Charlie Carell, and he has told me that you're pretty spicy.
Yeah. It's definitely possible to win a pretty big pot off me. Yeah, there have been some interesting spots which I've got myself into very unnecessarily in some games. Like I double check raised and then check called second pair just into a set like super deep in a single raise pot. I think I managed to dust off like 350 bigs or something in that pot, from like 5 big blinds in there on the flop. So yeah, no, I definitely prepared to get some chips in there, do something kind of exciting. I think like people they don't want to just sit there and play against someone who is waiting for aces. I mean, or even if it's a less extreme version of that. I think people kind of appreciate the fact that like a lot of money is going in and it is possible to, have a big winning day against certain play styles. Yeah, rather than just someone like knitting it up in the corner. Which, yeah, I mean, and I think it just comes naturally to me. It's kind of how I like to play poker anyway. So then it's, and then people enjoy playing against it, which, yeah, it just works for me.
And that alludes to some positive aspects of poker that are underappreciated. One of which is what you're referring to. It has that aspect. It has embodied in it the nature of this is kind of what life basically is. I'm going to the Twilight Zone a little bit, but in that you can choose to go down these rabbit holes of doing something exciting, etc., and you'll align with people who are doing something exciting. But you can also choose to take the nitty route, even with poker, and just like you'll get not a whole lot, but you'll get, you get consistent wins. You'll be consistent, I suppose, and not large swings. I just want to throw things like that out there because people don't understand, in my opinion. It looked like you thought about this at least a little bit. People don't understand it, in my opinion, the intrinsic value of this thing existing.
I think a lot of people don't realize they have a short-term mindset. They'll think that they're thinking long-term about like whatever it is. I mean, like, a classic one in poker are people who all the time when they're coming up don't want to really challenge themselves. They don't want to play in any kind of tough games. They don't want to experience any kind of variance. They just want to play in very high win rate stuff all the way coming up. And then they think, okay, I'm being very sensible. These other guys might go on massive downswings and they're going to have to deal with that. But then they don't realize that that's a very short-term way of thinking, right? Because the experience of playing in those tougher games, playing against those more aggressive players, is actually going to mean that you're much more likely to make that leap. And instead of someone getting stuck at mid stakes and grinding it forever, they make it to high stakes or nosebleeds or whatever it ends up being. And I think, people just have that kind of attitude across their life. They always think they're making sensible decisions, but they're actually being kind of irrational just because they don't want to. They're like scared of things with a bit more of an uncertain outcome.
I totally agree. The way that I look at it is I personally look at this, but it's been said in many different ways as different sorts of strategies of being or social strategies. It's said in like much more esoteric, either self-help or spiritual terms. I don't think people realize that these things are just saying the same thing a lot of the time. But in my opinion, there's all kinds of different ways of being that are short-term or long-term. And the long-term ones always have the property of being greater than zero sum. And there are ways of being, of like taking risks that are stupid gambles in all sorts of things, but are, that does not have the property of being greater than zero sum. In this case, going back to poker, what would be greater than zero sum, but not stupid, would be to keep challenging yourself. It is possible to challenge yourself too hard. Like you can bust your roll playing fucking you, and you could be like, what, I'm going to take a shot against Owen Messere at 100, 200. I have 50K. I'm going to prove myself. And then
it's funny you say that. There was a guy who literally did just this, who went on the upswing of a lifetime, and then he lost it all back playing me and various other people at 100, 200. And then we just saw him grinding like 200 NL 2 or 3 months later. I was like, oh, okay.
That sounds kind of nice.
You can definitely push it too far.
What's that?
You can definitely push it too far. Like, I think there's, you can battle all the regs at your main stake without having to go. I mean, he was like, his main stake was 5K, and he was like, I'm going to play anyone heads up at 20K all of a sudden. It's like, I mean, okay, sure, I'll play.
Well, the idea would be you challenge yourself. If things are going poorly, you challenge yourself a bit less and be a bit more humble. I always try to advocate this. Actually, by the way, there is a spiritual equivalent of this. This is precisely the principle of yoga. It's basically literally meant to be something like theory and practice. Actually, a lot of yoga culture was very logical. It's just people don't know how this stuff works. Veering back into poker, it looks like there is still lots of potential. You're suggesting, especially from these matches, that there's a lot more depth to poker than people realize, especially with these win rates you've achieved and these weird tangents that Davy Jones has taken you off of. Reminds me a bit of chess in some ways, and how chess has taken some units. I'm not like a massive chess expert, but I know that Bobby Fischer played against this Russian dude, and the Russian dude lost his mind because he didn't know what the fuck was going on. So Bobby Fischer beat him. It sounds to me that the poker dream is. Well, do you think it's alive? Do you not think it's very alive? Do you think a lot of people can, let's just say, make 6 figures a year from poker?
Oh yeah, no, 6 figures is. I think making 6 figures is very doable these days. Well, that's like, they have to make 50 buy-ins at 2K. That's so That's so doable.
Is 2K not that? You don't think 2K is that tough?
I really don't.
Okay. I will say,
Yeah, I think that I think these guys have a solid baseline strategy, and if you go in there and you're not really trying to adjust, and you just want to play a more accurate baseline strategy than them and hope you beat them, yeah, there is not tons and tons of win rate against these guys. But once you get into these adjustment wars, especially if they're inexperienced in it and like not willing to do it because you're like the one guy in the pool who's actually putting that kind of pressure on them, and you are really picking people apart, doing the off the table work, you can have like very, very high win rates still. I really think so many people come in with this mindset of they think like, oh, I'm not making that many mistakes when I play against the solver, or they'll play on GTO Wizard or whatever, and they'll see like, oh, I'm only losing it 3 or 4 big blinds to the solver, and they'll think that that's the max win rate you can have against them, but it's not at all. Like if I know exactly where your strategy is limited, the amount I am beating you by can way surpass 3 or 4 big blinds, like in the hands that you're playing individually against them. So I think people kind of kid themselves to some degree about how like solved poker is, just because there's a bunch of players who are trying to play this safe style where they're limiting their own mistakes, but in limiting your own mistakes, you put limits on your own strategy and what it's capable of. And then someone who like understands the freedom that that's giving them means that they can get away with loads of stuff which is supposed to be kept in check by you being prepared to throw the counter punches. But if that person isn't prepared to throw the counter punches, they can take a very liberal strategy themselves.
it sounds like, yeah, but if they're not throwing the counter punches, they're more exploitable than having 3 to 4 BB. I know what the counter punches fucking look like, and people are not throwing the counter punches. I played when I played the 100K MTT. I thought, what the fuck? When I looked at the solver, there's not it was people were not playing as I thought they were supposed to. Like it didn't. Things were not what they're supposed to look like.
I recently started playing some MTTs, and I was kind of just like, I'll play them for some fun or whatever. I'll just do something on Sunday, stream it. And I expected to get outplayed, at least in a fair few spots post flop. And then I was just looking at spots and I was like, okay, well, these guys they don't really know what the underlying dynamic between stuff is. Like, I can get away with complete murder against these guys, or like there were spots where people were just repping nothing. I was like sitting there tanking with like 4th pair or whatever, like really confused. Like, is he just trying to get me to call? Like, how is he repping so badly? Like, this guy's like a high stakes MTT, right? Like, surely he must know what hands he can have. But yeah, people just can't get off script. And like, yeah, if you're good at getting off script and you can think through things very logically rather than just having this sort of rigid copy the solver mindset, then there's so much edge against these guys.
I would say, by the way, there are overarching principles, especially when you take into account someone's whole game for these spots where they don't really know what their range is supposed to be or what they're repping. I mean, some of those spots can be very difficult because the solver looks at things from the true perspective, not from what's the convenient perspective, and does some things that are not very easy to apply. Let's put it like that. I'm thinking of situations where we got to give some examples. So like the middle card pairs, and if someone was to bet, this is what you're reminding me of, and how polar they really are. And these situations, or how the solver structures its ranges on these like situations with the middle card pairs. I'm supposing, say, in a single spot, button opens big and the big blind calls. Flop is like queen jack 3, check call. Turn is like a jack, and like it rolls off a jack and then a flush draw. Or did you have another spot in mind?
As in like these spots where people are betting way thinner than they should by not recognizing how the border's changed, or
that's a different kind of mistake. That's a fundamental mistake.
Yeah, no, No, the ones I was mostly talking about would be like, well, okay, so there was one hand which came to mind where, um, basically it was like 9-8 something, like 9-8-3, let's say with flush draw in a 3-bet pot. No, it was 9-9-6-3. Yeah, I remember because I had 6-5.
Mm-hmm.
Like 9-6-3 with a flush draw. I check back the flop, and then the turns of Jack completing the flush. And basically, like, out position isn't really supposed to do much medium-sized betting here. Is it like you're not supposed to really play around Queen Jack or King Jack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those hands are pretty happy to check, or they'll like go into a smaller bet sizing if they do bet.
This is where the
Uh,
flush completes, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
So,
that
so
makes
when you have
sense.
these top pairs of an overcard, they're supposed to play quite passively, and you sort of have these two parts of your range. You have like hands which beat aces, which
Mm-hmm.
are just happy to stack off, and then you have the hands which lose to aces or like lose to ace jack, and then they're trying to play, they're trying to play like much more pot controlled strategy. And the guy essentially ended up picking a sizing scheme where he just repped a bet with Queen Jack. But I also think the guy was good enough to recognize that Queen Jack was a check on the turn. So then I'm sitting there, or like, it's a very high frequency check. It's like just way out there in terms of the frequency it should be there. So I was just sitting there, just like, what am I actually putting this guy on? And then he just has like random ace queen where he was clearly trying to get me to fold like ace king with a club or whatever. It's very like vacuum mindset of he had some specific hand he was putting me on and he just wanted me to fold it. Rather than actually thinking about repping something and what the overall strategy should look like. And so then if I play a very solver response, that mistake is not that big. Like the EV loss for him picking a slightly wrong combo and a slightly wrong line is not going to be that detrimental to strategy. But if you can pick that out on the fly and be like, okay, this basically reps nothing. Maybe maybe once in a blue moon he's actually playing value hands like this, but not really. It just felt like he was just trying to get me to fold my missed draws. And so then I find the call with like basically every hand in range. And then you sit there and it's actually a UGV swing, and suddenly your win rate at this table is way, way, way higher. You don't have to make plays like that too often, and it's quite an innocuous spot as well. It's just me facing like a half pot pattern stab and then a half pot bet on the river and realizing that the guy is good enough not to go for this line with value, so then it just has to be a bluff. And
It's
then
ultra polar. There are such similar situations, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was just sat there like, is he just too scared to go all in? Like, does shoving here just make him uncomfortable? So he's just picking a non-committal size, which may have been it could have been a money scared thing. It could be like he's just lost and he just couldn't work out what his range was, and he wanted to bluff, so he just thought he'd pick a size which was fine and not too big a mistake. But it's like this is just the size where the solver was really trying to avoid it. Like even from the turn, it didn't like his size, and then when you kind of force it to use it on the river, it was still like a very minority size. Like it really wanted to then go like block or shove on the river. It didn't want to have this size for hands which weren't in range.
Sure.
Yeah, and you can. It's not like I can practice that exact spot and know that spot is coming, but if I have just a better understanding of how strategies work overall in poker, and then something like that comes up and I'm ready to punish them, you can have a much higher win rate than people would expect is possible. And like there's a certain level of player which is good enough to start reversing these things and start messing with you and make it much more complicated. But I think the vast majority of the time people give away all of this info completely by accident.
I would say that most people do not readjust very fast in my experience. Some people adjust very fast. Like some people I expect to like snap fucking readjust given, hero calling in that spot. That spot I would personally compare to, I would ask myself, like, how a polar would they be going here? What is the likelihood of them having various traps, especially based on like previous dynamics? There's various patterns to use to decide whether to hero call in these kinds of spots. But I think people are quite predictable when it comes to playing very obscure polar spots. Like, I try to group these kinds of things together and then ask myself, okay, how do they play these kinds of spots on the whole, especially given the other previous situations? There's some psychology where it becomes like super hard for people to run various bluffs, or they're more likely to run bluffs on these spots. Yeah, in these spots, you can find edges that seem like they shouldn't exist. At least if you were to study the solver purely, you would have to actually have experience and start thinking about how people have been grouping, been playing in overall in situations that follow certain patterns. That's something that I do that I don't really see people doing that much. And sometimes you can find,
I think you can, like, you can extrapolate from completely different spots about how someone's thinking about poker. And then, because I think sometimes people really want to see the showdown, or they want to get a sample over the exact spot which has come up, and they won't make these deviations based on their instincts. But oftentimes, you know, if you're paying enough attention, you'll see that someone has a certain way of thinking about the game, which you can make educated guesses about based on how they're playing other spots, and then you can be in a completely new one that you've never played against someone before, and still have an intuition for how they're going to perceive it.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. That is only. That's the challenge of teaching that I'm trying to figure out how to do, but that it can only be owned by, or I think part of that can only be owned by experience. And like really trying to tame the true understanding and looking beyond just memorization. I'm curious, what do you think of this? We'll see what you have to say. This range betting strategy, because apparently some very good players use it. I have a guess about how you use it, using what we just talked about guessing how people would interpret these situations. But what do you think of this?
So I would say that generally range betting makes both players' lives easier, because I think I think there's this characterization of it as, I will make my strategy simpler and I'll lose very little EV, and that's how a lot of people think about it. But it also makes the response a lot easier. And at this point, everyone's had so much practice against it. It's been going around for years. But yeah, it's much more demanding to play like a non-range bet strategy, because you need a level of foresight to understand why a certain hand will do something unintuitive. Like a certain hand might feel like it should always bet to you, but then there'll be like some fraction of it not betting. And that's easy to gloss over when you're playing a polar strategy and just sort of round things up and down. Like, if a hand is betting 80% of the time, like, fuck it, we'll just bet at 100%. But obviously, if someone's paying enough attention, there are problems that can lead to further down the line. So yeah, I think as I got more confident, I was pushing more edge against people. I kind of got more away from playing a range betting strategy, because I wanted to give other people more problems to solve. Like, there are definitely boards which I still range bet, but a lot of the ones which are more cuspy, I'm playing like more polar these days. As in, like, they're on the cusp of the range bet or the polar strategy. Like, you could reasonably play either, and then I have more of a favor for the polar strategy these days, just assuming that like the answers people will have to find is more complicated. And so even if my strategy will inherently have more mistakes, because the range bet strategy, you just can't make a mistake on the flop, right? And then oftentimes turn and rivers are actually quite simple. But I'm happy to get into the more complicated strategy, just assuming that even if you can't put your finger on exactly where you're expecting this particular player to mess up, but there will be more holes in their strategy later on, and I'll notice what they're making mistakes with quicker than they'll notice what I am. Like what I'm messing up. So then it will translate itself into more edge down the line. Even if you compare the theory EVs of the two, and it's not really a big deal, you can do whichever.
Yeah, that makes lots of sense to me. Just taking them down trees where there's more likely to be some sort of edge, where you're not sacrificing much, if any, EV by doing more checks or just I've looked into some situations like that. Partly for this exact reason. You even can take it to the next level and think, okay, what are the if you really understand the game, you could even say, okay, well, what are the situations where there's likely to be a drastic EV difference, so I can like not look at blind situations in trees, and that would save some time. Or look at situations that people tend to make mistakes in. There's some patterns for that. It's a little bit harder to figure out. But yeah, playing different games helps a little bit in this department. I have some theories, actually, that you could do such things in certain games in mix, but in some games, some games are really, really, you're kind of forced down the game theory rabbit hole, or the GTO rabbit hole, I should say.
Yeah. I much prefer that's kind of how I feel playing PLO, honestly. And I say this as someone who's no good at PLO. So, disclaimer, I could be way off. But when I did play PLO, it felt like everything was a lot more handcuffed. You just kind of, there were a lot of spots where I felt like I just didn't have a decision. But I felt in Hold'em, the thing which really I love about it is there is just so much freedom. Even when things are sort of solver mandatory to do, it's like the EV loss of taking the other line is often not going to be that big. And if you can develop a confident enough read on someone, you can easily justify it. I really like that side of playing Hold'em, and I feel like it's why I always come back to it, because I've tried to play other games and I can never, they just never hit the spot.
Yeah, you're right. PLO's definitely more pigeonholed, but it's not 100% so. And there's a few. I think the nature of the way the leaks worked out is a little bit different. There are some real cute things that can happen. That I still think for sure the biggest edges possible are in No Limit, but in PLO, a big mistake, a theme of mistakes that people do is assuming, you just kind of slam it in and there's nothing you can do. Whereas there are a few weird caveats that you can gain some edges in, basically oversimplifying the strategy and thinking, okay, it's just got to be this way. So there's quite some edge in those sorts of spots. There are some weird things that can happen.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, I'm not particularly good at PLO. In fact, I'm probably pretty bad. But yeah, it just feels sometimes you just get a bit handcuffed. And you can think the guy's under bluffing, but you can't do anything. You have too much equity. Oh shit, I got to run it. Whereas in Hold'em, it's your ability to either hero fold or like massively widen your calling range all of a sudden. It just felt to me like the like indifferent hand classes, or like those hands which are reasonable to adjust, is like, it feels like almost your entire range. Sometimes you can just go one way or the other based on making a read on someone.
Yeah, you can. That makes sense to me. You can go really hard, especially in the more subtle spots. It's harder to, and I mean, even versus like bad players, you can do that pretty often, even in obvious spots, actually. I'm curious. So I personally hypothesize that a real value of poker is that you can take all these sorts of ideas and apply them elsewhere. I'm wondering, I know you're partnering or you're doing some stuff with Charlie Carell, kind of a random matchup, but okay. And I'm wondering if you're getting involved in some other things beyond poker, and if any of these skills that you learn from poker apply outside of it?
I would say, so one thing which I always find interesting is poker sort of rewires your brain to think about things in terms of EV. It's just very easy to conceptualize things in a sort of non-results oriented manner. Which yeah, I think poker definitely helps with. Also not being variance averse. I think a lot of people just really struggle to maximize their outcomes due to variance aversion. I'll say in terms of like actually, like whether it's business ventures or whatever else, I'm not I'm still very much wrapped up in poker. I've been pro for like 6 years now, but I'm still it's still dominating my life. I'd say a little bit less now than it was. Like I'm running a CFP these days.
A CFP?
Yeah, coaching for profit. So
okay.
that's but which has been that's been really fun. Just working with people, trying to help other people meet their goals, and yeah, just like really rewarding putting together a group of people to just to work with and like see them employing stuff. Yeah, it's like I've always sort of enjoyed teaching and just seeing a bunch of people go out there and use my stuff and like have great results with it. It's it's a lot of fun. I feel like a proud dad sometimes when I see them like execute a hand exactly the way I was trying to teach them to. It's like yes, this is what I was dreaming of. This is why I put the CFP together, just to see stuff like that. Yeah, it feels a bit like a bit of giving back, honestly.
I appreciate that. I have started coaching more en masse for various different reasons, but I envision it in some ways translating over to real life. But there are many benefits to helping people become pros. There's some subtle benefits. I'm curious, how do you select your students for CFP or CFP? Because that seems a bit tricky.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It was nicely because after the World Championships, everyone was sort of coming to me, so I was full choice in terms of who I wanted to work with. So I basically had so there was some forms to fill out. Some people I knew beforehand, but also just talking to people and seeing if they would be receptive towards my way of coaching, like looking over some of their hands and making sure they had a thought process which I was going to be able to work with. I think some people are a little bit too rigid about certain things, and then I didn't want to have to fight people to to get them to play the way I want, because in some ways I'm actually quite prescriptive about how I think poker should be played. So yeah, just having seeing people with an open mindset and a willingness to fail actually was really important to me. I really wanted people who were happy to go out there and try stuff, and then like even it didn't need to work perfectly the first time, but they would go out there, they'd try stuff, they'd work out what was working, what wasn't, and we can just iterate that towards a point where it would eventually be super clean. But I think the people who want to execute something in a very clean way the first time they ever do it, it's a lot harder to actually get any progress out of them. So yeah, like things can be a bit messy upon the initial implementation, but yeah, that was, I think, that was the main thing which I was looking for, just people who were going to be very excited to take stuff and play around with it and see how it goes, and then if it went wrong, they were going to see it as a learning opportunity.
The word I believe is courage for this.
Yeah.
At least within reasonable doses. Too much courage is not good.
Yeah.
So you don't look. Are they people that have already been winning at poker, or like are they like 1-2 grinders?
Yeah. No. We only looking at players who were at least beating 500 NL online, but the vast majority of people were beating 2K or higher.
Oh, I see.
I wanted to have a small group who I would, but because there is a certain level where people get to where, I mean, one person expressed it as he didn't know what he didn't know, and it becomes very difficult at that stage because essentially everything publicly available is designed to get someone to that level, and nothing to get anyone beyond that.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think I can bring something unique. And I enjoy working with people on a bit more of an individual, like small group basis, rather than doing something which is a bit more like mass marketed and it would be targeted at getting the maximum number of signups. I'd rather take a small group and then try and like push them to the next level. I think also in terms of my own strategy, what I want to give away, like I wouldn't want to go out there and like, give away all the most complex things that I'm doing just to everyone at like at a more cutthroat price, and then a more cut price, and then the end result is just that everything I was doing becomes very mainstream, and then I don't have any edge. Like I want it to be with a bunch of people who I'm sure can use it and they're going to feel the benefits of it, and then like just having this smaller group who are who are using everything very well.
So one of the reasons why I'm not so worried about all that myself, well, I don't see myself. I think well we can. Speaking of which, we should play at some point as part of the plan to play a little 100 200. I do not think I'm a favorite, if I'm honest. I mean, if we're just talking about no limit, you should be a favorite, I think. But I'll give you some action, whatever. I think there's this, this actually goes back to this idea of greater than some possibilities. But Elon Musk talks about open market, and that's kind of the point where business is getting to, and that really is where the strongest are going to survive, essentially. But a lot of these mentalities in business of like, oh, you should keep things secret and all of that, kind of fail for a lot of reasons, compared to actually the opposite. But basically, like things change really fast, and things can become outdated. I guess in poker, that's not really true. That being said, what I found in poker, first of all, is a lot of the content creators are just not very, they're just not very good poker players. So it seems like there's some kind of room to take for just taking that title, essentially. And I found that while plenty of people use my strategies or use some things against me, like loads of people don't. It's just impossible to influence the entire market, or extremely difficult. And if you've done that, you've already won anyway. So I wouldn't give away everything, but I think there's a big place for truly talented poker players to take, like there's many of these content creators who aren't really any good at all, to take that title from them, if you know what I mean, and take that spot.
Yeah, I'm trying to toe the line a little bit because I do enjoy making content and I want people to be enthusiastic about poker. But it's also it's like trying to make sure that I don't give away the things which are okay. So there's basically those things which the content creators aren't explaining because they're not good at poker, and these things could be useful to a mid-stakes reg. And those things I don't mind giving away. I don't mind talking about that. But there are elements of my strategy which are separating me from the other high stakes regs. There are things which I think I'm doing better than Linus and Davy.
Like, can you say any of those things?
I
don't want to pressure you too much. Okay.
No. Those ones have to stay on the lock and key. Those ones have to, because I don't think some of them I think are kind of hard for people to even see that there's like a disparity going on. Like often you can have a hand which looks very normal, but someone's gotten owned, and it's very subtle what's happened, but someone's definitely making less money than the inverse, even though like it looks sort of random or whatever. And yeah, I think going into those is especially because the guys at mid stakes who, I would say that the majority of people who would be benefiting from it, or like even more casual than that, they're not going to be able to implement it anyway. So then if I give it away to show off, and it's like, oh, that's nice, and then it literally just it's just like now one of the things which I was counting on to actually compete against these top guys is now gone.
Okay, fair enough. So, yeah, I definitely understand that. Don't give away the best things. To be fair, by the way. Okay, on this podcast, fine. There'll be plenty of people watching. It won't be the end of the world, even if you would. But okay, I'm not gonna. I get that. I found some very specific things too. I'm reluctant to give away, but they're more like nuanced, precise exploits and like stuff like that. A big part of the reason why I'm also not so upset about giving things away is I don't intend on battling forever at the I don't want to be exact. It's not precisely my goal to be top poker player forever. It's more or to be the best possible poker player I could possibly be. Let's put it like that. Actually, it's more my goal to use poker for something greater. Meaning, I think that this sociologists say that are now starting to think that what's most maximally beneficial for society is sport, because it trains all these virtues and trains the mind and all these kinds of things, and it does so in a way that's healthy for people. And I believe that poker's trained you and others to be able to think about things in a much more productive way, especially to not be so results oriented, which I think is what the world needs. That's my goal with a lot of this. The hooks are. There's lots of hooks also in it. Like people like to look up to guys like you, or presumably maybe even the best in the world. I don't know. Are you the best?
Well, that's why I'm going out and playing everyone these days. I don't just want to prove it to the world. I also want to prove it to myself, because I think that the challenge, it's kind of a short time scale. There's a lot of variance to it, of course.
Right.
And I did say one of the key edges I had was, I think, the way I was performing against weaker players was, I felt like oftentimes me and the other the strongest regs, to some extent, there's some chips going back and forth. It can be hard to say exactly where it was going, but then I felt like I was beating I've beaten the weaker guys for more. But then that doesn't really prove that you're the best. I mean, it depends to some extent how people want to measure it. But yeah, I've been playing Linus recently, been playing some against Flushy, and that's how I really want to test myself and to see how I can do there. And so far I've been feeling pretty confident. I mean, the results have been a bit so-so. I mean, I'm up versus Flushy, down versus Linus so far, but not big numbers at all. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see how it goes, because I think for now it's am I the best? It's it's still maybe. I like to think so, but I'd say I've far from proven it, at least at this current moment.
It sounds like maybe. It's hard to take that precise title against steep competition.
Yeah, maybe. I didn't give you the clickbait for your podcast. Sorry. I should say yes. 100%.
Part of the clickbait is who are the top three to five players who are your competition. Who are the contenders? Let's just say the other four if you're one in the top five.
I'd probably say, Linus definitely, Davy definitely, and then if we're talking about heads up, then Berri has to be included.
Berri?
Berri Sweet.
Oh, really? I guess he must be one of the best poker players then. Allegedly, he's very good at mix, but I haven't really played him to tell his strain. Yeah, I can't really tell. He would be the one guy I'd one of the couple guys I'd personally think might be better than me in mixed, but what do I know?
Yeah, Berri's a bit of an enigma, right? He just kind of plays every game and wins, and everyone's a bit confused why. Although recently he had the match versus Sunita where it really didn't go very well, which is gives me some hope. But yeah, I would say that those are the main guys I would say I feel the need to conquer in order to climb the mountain.
Okay, fair enough. Are you taking any dives? I know you're doing something in Bali with Charlie. I actually didn't look too much into it, but are you taking any dives into the spiritual realm at all?
I mean, Charlie wants me to build a villa with him in Bali. I said I'd think about it. To be, not with him.
I misunderstood it. I thought it more like
he wants to build a bunch of villas somewhere on the beach in Bali. It all looks very nice, but I mean, I've sat over. We had a few drinks at lunch, and he told me it would be a great idea. I don't agree with that. We haven't signed the papers and all sorted out. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I'm even qualified to know whether it's a good idea. Yeah, it's definitely. I've just spent I spent essentially my entire adult life playing cards and avoiding any serious business dealings or interactions. So,
to be honest, it had more to do with I interpreted that there was kind of some crossover to the spiritual side of things.
Right, yeah.
Some kind of wellness side of things.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a very spiritual guy. He's big into meditation and all that. I see the benefits of introspection and self-knowledge and being very deliberate about what it is that you value and spending your time to actually further those values. But I don't really come at it from a particularly spiritual side. It's more just sitting down and thinking about life. I don't feel I don't feel as much of a connection to
fair enough. Okay, I thought that was likely because you know this guy and not many poker players know him. I thought, okay, maybe there's some.
He's trying to convince me. I mean, I don't know. We just kind of. I've gone to some of his games. We've had a great time. It's all been good fun. But yeah, he's trying to sell me on it. But I think I'm going to be a hard sell. It might take him a while.
I'm going to attempt to sell the audience and you briefly with a couple thoughts, because in fact there is something logical about all this, even though it may appear woo-woo, etc. It's a bit my thing to unite logic and spirituality. It actually is a bit of in my history. Do you want to be sold or no? Or do you want me to?
No, I'm open-minded.
Okay, so we were talking about this idea of doing a deep dive on certain individuals in poker to learn something deep about the game, etc. So at some point in my evolution, I realized that my optimization towards earning money was a little bit arbitrary, and it was actually, in fact, more rational to optimize towards something like impact and experience, as a quick summary. And so this culminated a bit in solving for a solution for the games of life. I use the word games plural because you can kind of isolate parts of reality into abstracted things. You can consider, for example, networking a game. There's an aspect of that that's hidden, or they don't consider the human aspect in it with that word networking anyway. It sounds a little dry, but you can consider politics a game. You can consider trust a game. How do you get people to trust more of each other? And you can consider making impact a game, things of this nature. But anyway, and you can consider, okay, well, is there such a thing as solving the game of life? That was the whole inspiration for this podcast, or a big part of it. Anyway, so one of the biggest sells for me on spirituality was as I looked and realized of what the optimal solution of behavior for humanity would be to create the best possible experience. It seemed to have various underlying principles, and it also seemed to coincide with many lessons that I learned. So, first of all, the game theory optimal social strategy for humanity, at least having various features and that are consistent, seems to be suggested by game. That seems to align very well with the ancient religions. You can see it very clearly if you take a look at what that is. It does advocate, in fact, no malicious intent at all, and retaliation sometimes, and it advocates mercy. So there's that. That's pretty powerful. There's a lot of things that were given in these past religions that are very, very good for one's wellness and their way of being, that seem like impossible coincidences, like yoga developing. Like, how did this thing develop? And it's actually been good for so long is actually a massive coincidence. People's frame of reference, we talk about this a bit, is not right for assessing such things. And as far as individuals go, I personally was intrigued to study the avatars, these apparently godlike beings. I don't know why not so many people have thought to do this, like Jesus, Krishna, Buddha, etc. And if you look very deeply at what they did things that demonstrated, like, they did things that were like fucking impossible for a huge percentage of people, and they did very mysterious and unusual things. But if you look deeply in their behaviors, what they did made loads of sense. Or Shiva also, they all did strange things. I can give some examples, but there's a logic in them that you can see that is actually optimized towards the greater good. Like the whole idea of what Jesus did precisely is what sent me into like a state of ecstasy for 4 days, when I realized it united precisely with logic to save the world. It was a necessary thing. It was such a weird feeling to be on ecstasy for 4 days. I didn't take any drugs or anything. It was just a huge aha moment. Other things really in what Krishna does all sorts of weird shit. But if you read the Mahabharata, the holy Hindu text, it shows how in very difficult situations morality is supposed to play out. And in my opinion, like I started to realize it aligned with logic very well, and started to analyze some of the strange behaviors this guy would do. So one strange thing is he would like toy with all these women, but not have sex with them, right? But he would like give them enough so that they would come back for more, so that they would reach this state, so that he would play with them so that they reach this state, so that they become released from like karma, essentially, is one way of saying it. But basically so that they would no longer be... Yeah, this one's a bit more controversial, actually. This one's just because they would get the state of inner peace a lot more easily if he was to give them something and have them chase a bit more and all of that. But other examples that are a bit more clear are how he dealt with this guy how he dealt with this like tyrant, and he did everything possible to negotiate for peace, but the guy wouldn't budge at all, and then finally they went to war. But it took really an ass long time, and a lot of corruption and that sort of stuff, and like how to deal with these kinds of difficult political situations. Yeah, so the one with the women is strange, but that one makes more sense if you like believe in karma and these kinds of things. The better example is actually more the political one, where how do you say? Many things led up to the point of finally war, where there's no other possibility.
Right. Rather than to not seek out conflict, but not to be weak if conflict is necessary.
Yeah, that's part of it, but also to do as much as possible to aim for peace is part of the story. I'm trying to think of what else. Another one was actually, here's a story in it. So the false king, Duryodhana, who's got all the power or whatever, he's going to Krishna, who's a prince. And people don't really know that Krishna is actually God in disguise. And so he goes to Krishna and he sits at his head because Krishna's laying down. He sits at his head because he's got quite an ego. And then comes Arjuna, who's the hero of the story. He sits at his feet, and whatever the tradition is, Krishna is supposed to give Arjuna the first say based off of Krishna is supposed to give whoever sees first the first say of like what from them he gives to them to support in this war that they're about to fight. These are the two adversaries in the war, right? Mm-hmm. So the options are, it actually doesn't, that part doesn't matter that much, but the options are, the first saying is that because Arjuna had humility and bowed at Krishna's feet, he gained an advantage. And then the options were to either pick like the entire army of Krishna or to pick something like wisdom or Krishna's counsel. And so Arjuna, who's the hero, or let me start with Duryodhana, picks like the large army, which is something like picking like a huge bankroll in poker and not really thinking about, okay, what are the inner leaks and all of that. And then Krishna picks Arjuna picks Krishna's counsel, which is like wisdom. It's kind of like, okay, what are the actual right decisions I need to be making to win this battle? And so it's like the story of picking right action, which literally means doing the right thing to get the best possible result versus picking like the immense gratification, the end goal of what you're trying to get with those sorts of things. Does that make sense? Picking like riches or picking, a nice house or whatever. You want to pick the things that lead potentially to those sorts of things.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what's that?
Well, just the idea that if you create something valuable, then money is, the money will take care of itself. It's something which I always think is very important, rather than seeking money and then like hoping you create something which will lead to you getting rich. But like money always follows value rather than the other way around.
Well, it eventually does, right? And so does peace, so does you name it, happiness, all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
you create the circumstances for something to come to you rather than chasing the thing directly.
Well, it's as I say in any self-help book, it's long run, seeing the long run versus short-term gratification. There's supposed to be a perfect alignment of a true religion with logic and true alignment of religion and logic is the ultimate theme. Like anything else is all bullshit, is my personal understanding. But I'm really big on things needing to making sense. And if you look at all the things Buddha said and did, it also aligns for the most part. I haven't been able to figure out a couple things that he said precisely, like past lives specifically. It's hard to prove. I have some kind of proofs of it, but he was extremely logical also, and he didn't actually believe in God. The irony is that people believed he was God, but I thought it was obvious to study some of these weird ass avatars or supposed godlike figures and see if there's something that's hidden within them. And I personally discovered that it definitely is something there. So that's what really intrigued me.
Well, there's of course going to be reasons that these stories propagate themselves and are valuable to people even today. I think that's kind of where I stand personally, is that there can be value in the teachings of these things without necessarily believing in like the non-physical, like ethereal world. Like that's the bit which I struggle with, but like the actual value of the teachings and like the stories and the wisdom is that's like a different question entirely, which I think there clearly is value to.
Sure. for the non-physical world, my personal understanding of it is like the physical has to come from somewhere. All the something has to come from somewhere, and that's like really the foundations of reality. Or this is like what the spiritual people would call another dimension. Although this is where things start to get woo-woo, and it's hard to verify things except for the fact that you can see various emotional patterns that play out over time. I mean, this is very clear. But yeah, appreciate you being willing to take you down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, but there's quite some surprises in spirituality. There's quite some weird motherfuckers. Let's see if I can think of another story. The story of Buddha. Like some of these stories are unbelievable to read. Allegedly, Buddha in a past life, I don't know if this shit's true, but he like saw as a prince multiple cubs that were starving to death for cubs of a tiger. And what he did was he jumped off a cliff to save these multiple cubs as a prince. Like I don't know if that shit's true, but okay.
Very noble if it is, but
I don't know if it's really even the right decision to sacrifice yourself for, that one. Pretty fucking insane. There's other crazy stories too. More of actually, the Christian religion has some crazy stories. There was like a 12-year-old girl during the time when the Romans were persecuting the Christians. This 12-year-old girl decided to just let them take her and like fucking die for Christ. And like the executioner didn't even want to kill her. And she had like made the guy kill her by like pressing the axe against her throat. Like these were some of the stories that turned the citizens of the Roman Empire against the actual government. But
Right.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different things like that happened.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, that's a trip down the Twilight Zone. Anyway, anything you'd like to say or promote before we exit this?
no, I'm all good. I mean, looking forward to playing. That'll be exciting.
All right, yeah. Well, we'll play. I'll give you some action. I believe in supporting the champions of poker, and I think it'll be a fun match. I hope I can figure out ways to beat you.
I hope you can't, but good luck.
All right, fair enough. I have to live up to the reputation battle a little bit. If I'm gonna be, if I'm gonna be a poker authority, I got to battle you some. So we'll make it happen.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay. Well, guys, about to take on possibly best in the world, minimum top 3. We'll see you at the tables. Thank you for your time, Owen. Thank you for entertaining the trip down the Twilight Zone as well.
Yeah, no worries, man. I enjoyed it. It was a great time. Thank you for having me.